Hey friends, Silvano here from roughindstudio.com. Today with a new tutorial where I'm going to show you some ways on how you can actually tackle those nasty unpleasant frequencies in the top end from hi-hats that sound like this. You know that? Maybe you stood in the club and the music was loud and you felt something like a knife that stitched into your eardrum. That's exactly those kind of frequencies from hi-hats that sound so unpleasant in my opinion, especially if the sound is played out loud. So yeah, I'm going to show you some ways on how we can tackle this. Before we jump in, just really quickly, I just wanted to mention my 7-step low-end checklist, which is literally a reference guide, a checklist with all the tools, techniques, the plugins you need to reference to if you're stuck with mixing low end, the kick or the bass line. And yeah, so just go and download if you want. It's for free, of course, and you can find it in the description below. So yeah, now let's jump in. Okay, so let's just quickly play that track so we can see what's the result of that processing. This is the already processed file, and now pay attention to the top end without the processing that we did on this track. Really unpleasing in my opinion. Now try to turn the track a little bit up and you know what I mean. Now you can complain that it is too less top end, but believe me or not, it's just right in my opinion if I compare it to other tracks. Okay, so the first tip is we need to find out where we stand against other commercial release tracks, right? Because if you don't have a reference, we actually don't know if the top end is too harsh or if it is just right? And so what I use is this plugin called Adapter Metric AB from Plugin Alliance, and it's really simple to use because you can actually just quickly level match the reference track. So let's have a listen to the unprocessed track and against to the reference track. For this reason, we actually can set a high setting, and we can just reference here. So this is our unprocessed one, right? The blue one. And if I compare it to the reference track, we have way too much top end in our track, right? So another tool that I use for referencing is this isotope tonal balance. This line actually just got drawn from some reference tracks that I loaded into this plugin. So it's an average line of maybe, I don't know, 5 or 10 reference tracks that I found sound really good. So if we stay just around in this lane, we can be sure that the track should sound like the other one because it's an average line, right? So let's just play that track again. And what we can see is actually the top end around, I don't know, 13k is way too much, right? And if I now switch back to the processed one, actually moves. And what is also very interesting to see is that the line here also goes back into the average line of the reference tracks, right? Because if we have the too much top end, it's lopsided. So somehow it's the tonal balance is actually out of balance. So that's why it's really important that we take care of the top end, right? The top end is maybe still a little bit on the upper side, but I don't know, we have a lot of hi-hats here. We have 6 closed hats and we have 2 open hats. That's how the nature of this track is. So step number 2 is actually to process the individual hi-hats. So for example, this one. Sounds okay now. But this was a really bad guy, right? And what I actually do is I really just go through every single hi-hat and find out which one is the harshest one, the unpleasing one, and then just go with some EQing maybe, or maybe with some de-essing. Also the Isotope Spectral Shaper is a cool plugin for this reason. But on this particular hi-hat I was using my good friend Secret Weapon Golfus EQ, and yeah, you just load in that motherfucker and then it does its thing, you know. And if you turn up the volume a little bit with the unprocessed one, it hurts in my ear, it does, maybe in yours also. Here it already sounds a little bit more pleasing, maybe it's still a little bit harsh. Maybe we can tweak it with the brighten setting, bring it a little bit down. Something like this. Instead, if you don't have the Golfus, you also can just use some basic EQing. And I basically just sweep around and find the really nasty frequencies. Just take it out a little bit. Yeah, I do this on the really harsh closed hats, and then I go group all together, all the hats together, and then I do some processing on all the closed hats again, with, for example, this Golfus EQ, or maybe some basic EQ if you like to. Yeah, here was done, I cut around 4K again. Sounds very unpleasant in my opinion, this 4K around this. And then what I also did was the same thing on the open hats. Group them together and process them all together with the Golfus. Sorry. And those are small changes again, right? So we did it on the open head, on the group. I'm actually not sure of, yeah, only on the group, not on the individual, but it's a taste thing, you know. And we did it on the really harsh, nasty frequencies on the hi-hats, closed hats, and on the group as well. So to sum it up again, tip number 2 is just use some sort of EQing, finding the nasty frequencies. I use the Golfus. I cannot recommend it enough because it's awesome. It's so quick. You see, it gets you really quick results. And what I like to do as a next step is to just work on the master channel, right? But this time I used some MS EQing on the master channel. And what I like to do is cutting on the sides, but on the top end, right? To make it a little bit more controlled, a little bit, yeah, tighter. And on the mid channel, I went quite with a steep cut, right? And I actually have the feeling that this cut is holding the top end a little bit better together somehow. And it also sounds more pleasing to my ear. And then next processing was this spectral shaper that I already mentioned before. It's basically a de-esser, right? So here you can actually hear what we attack with this range. I can actually set the range. And I found, especially this region, had some problems to work on. The medium setting. And I also tweaked the tone a little bit. If I turn it down, it gets a little bit darker, but if I turn it up, it brightens up a tiny little bit. But I guess, yeah, I didn't want it to be too harsh, so of course I didn't went too drastic. Right, it's like this. And again, this is a really small change that we did, again, very subtle, but all those tools stacked together gives us yeah, pleasing result. So this was before, really unpleasing and harsh. This to be the after. And again. And the interesting thing now is, I think it's too dull, right? But remember, we just have soloed all the closed heads and worked on them, right? So we don't have a neutral view of the thing, right? Because our ears already got used to the quite top-endy sound, and if I turn back in the other sounds, it actually sounds dull. Yeah, it's really a mental thing, so maybe let's play it again and we think differently now. And because we're confused now, we have good old adapter and good old reference track. This is our track. This is the reference one, and so the orange one is the reference track, and it's really cool, this plugin. I mean, you can go really crazy here. And if we switch back, let's switch way back without the processing, and let's see how we do against the reference track. Compare those two. See at the orange one. Sorry, you can't see my finger on the screen, but compare just the orange against the blue one, right? Now I'm switching back to the processed one, and we are quite in line right now. Let's go a little bit further down. And yeah, I think it's not too bad. I think we are just in the average line, and yeah, that's it for now. I hope this helps. Same problem as before, we only listen to the top end, and now we think again there's too less top end, right? But let's compare both tracks without those filters. Don't listen to the low end, by the way, it needs some work. So, but yeah, top end is there in my opinion. Doesn't sound too harsh anymore. It sounds pleasing. Okay, so to sum it up, compare your track, your top end, against the commercially released track that you like, that sounds pleasing to your ear. And if you don't have the adapter plugin, you can also just load it in and play a loop where the hi-hats are in it and everything, right? And make sure that the loudness is the same. Maybe use a loudness meter or an RMS meter, level match it manually, and then yeah, you quickly find out if you need to work on the top end. If yes, just go with EQ on individual hi-hats, right? And then again on the grouped tracks, and then I worked on the master channel mid-side, EQing as a second step, right? Just EQing the top end a little bit, the mid channel also kind of a bit, to glue it a little bit together. Worked again on some harshness with the Spectrum shaper from Isotope, but again, you don't need to use this particular plugins. You can also just use a de-esser if you have one from Waves or whatever, and then just take out the harshness on the master channel. And then again, third step, reference again, either with this plugin. I love it because it gives me fast results, a fast insight. If it's still too harsh, maybe you need to turn it down. Another bonus tip is listen to different volumes, right? So this is the processed one, really quiet. Let's bring it in. It still sounds pleasing to me. And now when I switch back to the unprocessed one, which sounds harsh, the hi-hats are way too loud compared to the other stuff, right? They stick out somehow. If I turn down the track, the volume, I can really, I can hear if there's something wrong with the hi-hats, because they stick out so much. and it just gives us a little hint what we can do, what we need to work on, or maybe that the top end is too loud, right? And you can also do the opposite, turn it up really loud. I don't do it now here on the fader, but yeah, you know. And then if it hurts in your ear, you also know that the hi-hats are too harsh. And yeah, so that's it for today. I hope this helped. I hope this sparks some inspiration, hopefully. And again, you don't need to use all those third-party plugin. You can, maybe you find some DSO that are for free, some reference tools. I think there are others out there. And actually I have all packed in those kind of plugins in my 7-step low end checklist, which you can download in my description if you have some problems with mixing low end now and then. It's a cool reference guide. Also, not only mixing low end, it's really fully packed with plugin recommendations for referencing tracks, how you can train your ears to get a better sounding mix, raw minimal micro house mix. Really packed full with stuff, with helpful things, so really go and download it if you like. And yeah, so that's it. Thanks for watching, thanks for your time, cheers.